now. I mean, you're a banker, so the logical question would be financing. But let me just move a little bit away from your job as a banker and your position as a young global leader at the World Economic Forum. ASEAN, is a young demographic region. We have many young people. And I'm just wondering, how do this young generation get involved more in promoting and bolstering growth, and in terms of how they can contribute to improving connectivity in the region?
So a huge question, and moving away from kind of core infrastructure, at least physical infrastructure. I mean, there's no denying that here in ASEAN, for many countries, the demographic dividend of a young population is an enormous catalyst to growth. And you see it, you land in Jakarta and you see the Gojek motorcycle helmets, and you see how disruption can live. And that's physical infrastructure in a way in terms of getting people around Jakarta. I think the role that we need to, that we should expect really from the sort of sub-40s generation is digital disruption. It's a key part of the connectivity story that I think we don't talk about that much. In part because it doesn't need a big wall of debt financing. It does need a big wall of equity financing. But in many cases across the region, it's getting it. In my industry, in banking, fintech had $1 billion of investment in Asia in 2016. That was more than the US, which is a kind of amazing statistic. And there's plenty of governments that have comprehensive programs to enabling those enterprises to scale. I mean, Singapore, where I live, is certainly one with their fintech focus and their regulatory sandbox as they kind of get these startups to scale. So I think the role that young people play in the digital disruption and digital connectivity and the demand that they have for it will really be transformational. I think the other thing we can't forget as we talk about physical infrastructure is more on the environmental side. All the research on millennials or really any of the sub-30 generation, they just won't stand for the kind of environmental disruption that projects maybe 50 years ago brought with it. And so they'll help us push the envelope on that in a way that I think is really constructive for long-term healthy growth.
Thank you. If I may move on to Khun Tevin just to complete the circle, or the semicircle, so to speak. You're a private sector, the head of a private sector business leader. What do you expect from infrastructure projects? And do you feel that the private sector input is taken on board by the governments in terms of when they start planning massive infrastructure projects?
Thank you. Quite challenging, especially when my minister is on the panelist as well. But I'll give it a go. I think on the infrastructure, if I can maybe speak from my experience about the energy industry. The energy industry faced few challenges in addition to the oil price being maybe 1/3 or half of what it was before when we started to invest in a lot of infrastructures. But another challenge is to continue to invest in those infrastructure to fuel the ongoing economic growth. And for the intra-regional infrastructure, we're talking about maybe power plants that can supply electricity from one nation to another neighboring countries. We're talking about the pipeline infrastructure that can link the molecules of gas, natural gas as well. We're talking about the LNG receiving terminals, which would allow this region to actually import LNG from outside to provide to the gas-fired power plants. We also talk about coal mining, talk about the retail gas stations and other things as well, refineries, petrochemical to supply to the region. And the word connectivity is actually applied to energy industry quite some time back when we talk about exchange of product, tradings, or cross-border transaction. So those kind of investment require a lot of fundings and require a lot of support by the government. I do have some wish list. As a support from the government, I think that all those infrastructure required long-term commitment from the private sector, large amount of investment. And so the certainty in terms of policy and regulatory framework is one thing that is critical to assure the investors of what to be expected. I think the cross-border transaction is becoming more and more. So if the government of the different countries would work together with the private sector in order to allow a more fluid process in facilitating the cross-border transaction, that would help a lot in terms of supporting the investment decision. I think the liberalization of foreign investment is another thing. Obviously, the experience, the lesson learned from one companies in other country can benefit the investment in the other country. So liberalization of allowing the foreign investment into certain infrastructure would help. And I think lastly is the investment protection for the foreign investor. That would be one area, whether it's the tax system, the promotion things that would have to be clear from upfront. I think those kind of continuity and certainty would help provide the investor from the private sector to be more confident. On the financing side, I think so far we've seen a lot of good work among the banks and the investors. For example, a project of building the hydropower in Laos, providing electricity to Thailand. The banks would consider the sort of a supply chain of this investment. So take into consideration the rating, the credits of the market, as well as the original country into providing the funding. So I think that has been ongoing very well, and we would see a lot of this project more and more, because connectivity in energy is very crucial for economic development.
Right. So I think if we can just kind of summarize our the start of our discussion, connectivity definitely is a key player in regional and even localized growth, and you need both government, private sector, and especially multilateral agencies to play a role. Can I just read to you a little bit about the ASEAN Connectivity 2025 Vision Statement that was, I think, signed by the ASEAN member countries some time ago? To achieve a seamlessly and comprehensively connected and integrated ASEAN that will promote competitiveness and a greater sense of community. Now that's the vision for connecting ASEAN. I don't think we are there. 2025 is not such a long way away too. I'll just pose this general question to the panel and jump in as and when, maybe I'll start with Minister Sun. Cambodia, probably would be,
Pemirsa tetap di BeritaSatu News Channel, Special Report World Economic Forum on ASEAN 2017 akan kembali saja berikut.